Hi everyone, it's good to be here with you. I'm Michelle Mays. I'm the founder of the Center for Relational Recovery and Partner Hope. And today I want to talk to you guys about the topic of sobriety definitions for your significant other. So what I want to talk about is why it's important that you, as the betrayed partner, know what your significant other's sobriety definition is and that you have a chance to give feedback about that sobriety definition. So we're going to walk through why it's important and even a little bit about what sobriety definitions are, both for those who are in a relationship with an addict and those who are in a relationship with somebody who has cheated by having an affair or a couple affairs, that kind of thing. So first of all, let's talk about why you need to know what your significant other's sobriety definition is. So the sobriety definition that your significant other is using, that the cheating partner is using, is really a big part of the sexual agreements and relationship agreements between the two of you. So in your relationship, you have agreements about what constitutes faithfulness and what constitutes fidelity. And the sobriety definition is part of the agreements about here are the things that we have agreed as a couple we're not going to do, things that are not going to happen. Now, your significant other, the cheating partner's sobriety definition may not, all the things in it may not apply to you because you're not dealing with an addiction, but they make up the fabric of the agreement between the two of you about what is allowable within the relationship in terms of sexual behavior and what's considered out of bounds and what's considered in bounds in terms of the relationship. So if you're in a relationship with somebody and you don't know where the boundaries fall around sexual behavior and around sexuality, it's going to be very challenging for you to feel trust with that person, to trust them. It's going to be very challenging for you to be sexual with them because you don't know exactly where the sexual boundaries are in the relationship. So all of these things, not knowing them, creates hurdles for you as the betrayed partner. And it's really important that you do know about them and learn about them in order to feel safe and feel like you have a clear understanding of where the sexual boundaries in the relationship are for your significant other because they have broken the boundaries in the past. So many of us, when we come into a long-term relationship or we get married, we assume that we're all working from the same definition of monogamy or fidelity or the sexual agreements. We think faithfulness means the same thing to everybody. And many people never have conversations before they enter into these relationships about what does monogamy mean to us exactly? What does faithfulness mean to us? Does that mean that pornography is okay? Does that mean that flirting with the opposite sex is okay? Does that mean that sexual chatting is okay? Like where are the boundaries and what does it mean to each one of us to be faithful? So having this understanding with the person that you're in a relationship with is vital. Like you need to both be on the same page, and the sexual sobriety definition is part of being on the same page together and part of this information that you both need. So if you are not dealing with somebody who is an addict, but your significant other cheated by having an affair or had a couple of affairs, you're going to need the same kind of conversation because you're going to want to know where are the sexual boundaries? What are the boundaries around sexual behavior, relationships with people with the opposite sex, flirting or intrigue with other people? You're going to want to know where those boundaries fall so that you can know that there are boundaries in place that protect the relationship and protect the relationship from vulnerability to further affairs. And this is going to be particularly important if you've got somebody who, if your partner has had more than one affair and there's sort of a pattern to how these affairs develop, then there's going to need to be boundaries around whatever those behaviors are for that person that sort of leads them into developing these relationships. So whether you're dealing with addiction or you're dealing with affairs, knowing about what your partner's sobriety definition or sexual boundaries are is vital for you to have that information. So here's how I would suggest you go about getting this information. All right, so it's one thing to say, okay, I need to know this. This is really important for me. But now you need to know, how do I go about getting this information? So I'm going to start with what not to do. So here are a couple things not to do. One, do not sit down with your partner and work out their sobriety definition or sexual boundaries with them. Do not take this on as a joint project, because it is not a joint project. They are the ones that cheated, and they're the ones that are addicted, and so they have to take full ownership of their sobriety definition and full ownership of their sexual boundaries, and they have to do the work around this. So it's their job to create this sobriety definition and sexual boundaries. It's their work to do. So you do not want to do this work for them. So what you also would, so how do you do this? How do you get the information? So what you do want to do is you want to ask them to do the work. If they don't have a sobriety definition, ask them to work with their therapist to figure out their definition of sobriety and to get it concretely laid out, because without a sobriety definition, it's hard to know if you're sober or not. So you have to have a sobriety definition. So you can ask them to work with their therapist on this, and then you can do a couple of different things. You can ask them to allow you to join them for a therapy session with their therapist. So their therapist is one who will have worked with them on their sobriety definition. So it's good for their therapist to be in this appointment. So you could say, could I come in? Can I join you? And will you, with the help of your therapist, present your sobriety definition to me? Like, let me know what it is. And then let me give you feedback about whether or not this definition of sobriety meets my needs for safety. Whether I feel safe enough, and whether I think it's a good enough sobriety definition that it can help us. It's like a foundation and a platform that we can build trust from and safety from. So you can ask to go in and meet with their therapist and to do this. You can also ask for a conjoint or a co-therapy session with your therapist, their therapist, and then the two of you, so all four of you meeting together. To again do the same thing, have the addicted partner, the cheating partner, present their sexual boundaries or their sobriety definition, and then you be able to give feedback about how it feels for you, and if there's anything that you would like to request that they change or alter about it or clarify for you. So I would try to do this in a setting where you have therapeutic support. I think to try to do it at home and say, hey, come tell me your sobriety definition and do it just without any help often is an invitation to have a big conflict. It's also without accountability. So the cheating partner can tell you things that are in their sobriety definition that maybe are or maybe are not, and the therapist will never be the wiser. So doing it with the person that they actually worked out the sobriety definition with, and having that person be in the room, and that person gets to hear any concerns you have or any requests that you're making, so that they can then work with the cheating partner on changing the sobriety definition, is really, really valuable. You really want the cheating partner's therapist to be part of that process, because it provides accountability to what is being said. So you may need to request this. You may need to ask for this type of meeting. Ask your significant other to talk to their therapist about it. Make contact with the therapist yourself and ask for this type of meeting and say, here's why I'm asking. Here's why this feels important to me and relevant. And I would really want you to be there for it, for accountability purposes, and so that if there's anything that needs changed in the sobriety definition, you can facilitate helping my significant other to do that. So that's how I would do the process of getting the information about the sobriety definition. I would definitely have help with that and utilize your therapeutic community of support around it. So one other thing about this, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what actually goes into a sobriety definition. So if you've not yet had disclosure, so you may be thinking, well, I haven't had disclosure, so if I go and hear about a sobriety definition, I'm going to get information trickled out to me, and I don't want that. I already had that happen. I'm just waiting for full disclosure. So there are ways to do a sobriety definition that do not reveal details about acting out behavior. So I'm going to give you an example of a sobriety definition that pretty much covers all the bases, but doesn't give extra detail, right? So a sobriety definition that covers the bases goes like this. The things that I am abstaining from that are part of my definition of sobriety, I do not do these behaviors. If I do them, I lose my sobriety, are that I do not have any sexual contact with anyone outside of my primary relationship. I do not have any contact of any kind with any former partners or anybody who I've ever acted out with or may have acted out with. I do not watch or view pornography. I do not engage in masturbation. And I do not intrigue, flirt, or cultivate relationships with people outside of my primary relationship of the opposite sex. So those things are very general categories that pretty much everybody should have in their sobriety definition, regardless of what their acting out behavior has been. And they don't give you any more detailed information about the acting out. So that's just an example of how you can still do this exercise without getting information that you don't want dripped out to you that you're really waiting to get in a full disclosure. But you don't have to wait for disclosure to know what the sobriety definition is. So just to let you think about how to do that if you haven't had disclosure yet. All right, so let's talk about the definition of sobriety and how you define sobriety. So there are 3 different communities, 12-step communities, that folks who are sexually addicted attend. And let me just say something to you guys who are dealing with affairs. I'm going to talk about the way we do sobriety definition for addiction right now. I would encourage you not to tune out and to stay in the process of listening to this, because I think that the way that this is done is a really helpful tool for those who are also dealing with affairs and not addiction. I think it's a really helpful tool to use, period. If you've dealt with cheating, it's a really good way of setting your sexual boundaries and thinking about what needs to change. So I would encourage you to stay in the conversation here and think about how to maybe use this tool for yourself in your relationship. So the 12-step fellowships, the 2 big ones that most people go to are Sex Addicts Anonymous, which is SAA, and Sexaholics Anonymous, which is SA. Sex Addicts Anonymous has you define your own definition of sobriety, and they use what's called the 3-circle method. And we're going to talk about that more in a minute. Sexaholics Anonymous, SA, says the definition of sobriety is, they kind of give you a definition. They say it's no sex outside of a committed relationship, including sex with self. So they've sort of laid down the sobriety definition there. I have clients that do both of these programs, and I don't really have an argument about where they go in terms of getting the support that they need. And there are areas of the country where one is much more prevalent than the other, etc. However, I do ask that all the clients at CRR do the 3-circle method in terms of figuring out their sobriety. And the reason that I ask this and that our team uses this tool is that we want everybody to take full responsibility for their definition of sobriety. We don't want to just hand it to them. The SA definition of no sex outside of a committed relationship, including sex with self, really leaves a big loophole for porn use. And porn is so much a part of so many people's sexual acting out behavior that loophole really needs to be closed for many people. So I ask everyone to do the 3-circle method so that they're really thinking about what their sobriety definition should be. So here's how the 3-circle method goes. You have 3 concentric circles. There's like an inner circle, second circle, and outer circles. That's how you want to think about these 3 circles. Not a Venn diagram, but 3 concentric circles, okay? So inner circle are the things that you are going to be abstinent from. So these are the behaviors that if you do them, you will have lost your sobriety. And these are the behaviors that you've been compulsive with, that you've had compulsivity around, and that you need to abstain from in order to have a healthy relationship with sex. So remember, this is a process addiction, so we can't just put sex down and never pick it up again. God forbid, right? That would not be good. Instead, we are learning to have a healthy relationship with sex. So these are the behaviors that you need to abstain from in order to do that. So in the inner circle is going to go things like the things I already mentioned. So things like no sex outside of my primary relationship, no sexual contact of any kind, no masturbation, no pornography, no intrigue and flirting with other women, no contact with former partners, things like that. You want your inner circle stuff to be concrete so that it's really clear if you've broken it. So you want it to be concrete behaviors. So here are some of the things that do not belong in the inner circle. They belong in the second circle. So let me tell you what the second circle is quick first. So the second circle is, in that circle, the person outlines, if I do these behaviors, or these are things that when they're happening, I'm more vulnerable to ending up in my inner circle. Like if I do these behaviors, I could end up losing my sobriety, or these are behaviors that when they're happening, I need to be particularly aware and cognizant because they could take me into my inner circle. So that's a list of triggering kinds of things that can lead to loss of sobriety. So here are some things that you don't want in your inner circle that really belong in the second circle. One of those things would be fantasy and taking what I think in essay they call it lust hits, like taking, objectifying people sexually, kind of taking a hit off from visually looking at people. So the reason you don't want that in your inner circle is that is a pretty chronic behavior for a lot of addicts. And that is something that they have to work on over time to correct. So there's also a saying in SA that there's progressive victory over lust, right? That it's progress, not perfection. You're progressively working on your inner mental world around the sexual acting out. So it's really important that a person does work on that inner mental world, but that is going to be a work that they're working on for quite a while to begin to really get that level of being drawn toward fantasy, being drawn toward remembering, acting out, and thinking about it, being drawn toward objectifying people around them, that kind of thing. So you don't want that in the inner circle because they're going to have to reset their sobriety date all the time, and especially at the beginning. And that's a useless sobriety date, right? And it also plays a lot of mental games with the addict when they're having to reset the sobriety date for things like that. And then they can get into, oh, I didn't really objectify that person. I was just noticing them. And anyway, you can get into all kinds of craziness there that is not helpful because it's not concrete enough. So that goes in the second circle. You should really have in the second circle issues around fantasy, euphoric recall, which is recalling past acting out experiences, objectifying other people. That should be a second circle behavior that you are working not to do and to not engage in. So that's one of the things that you don't want in that inner circle. Second circle is going to be things like what we just said. Then it's also going to be things like, just behaviors that kind of led the person, patterns that kind of led the person into their acting out. So it could be things like going into a bar and drinking. Like maybe being in a bar and drinking is where the person would then, once they started drinking, start to flirt with people, start to get interested in people, and start to create intrigue that would lead to acting out. So that would be a second circle behavior. I do not go into bars and drink. I do not drink socially unless my partner is there. I do not drink in situations where I can lower my inhibitions and put myself at risk. Those kinds of things would be good second circle behaviors. The other kinds of things you want in the second circle are things like boredom. Like boredom is a big trigger for people, or unscheduled, unplanned time. So time that I don't really have anything to do, that can be something that you have to watch for. Time at home alone, where there's unscheduled time and nobody is around. So these are things that are going to happen. You're going to get bored. You're going to have unscheduled time. You're going to have unplanned time, that kind of thing. They're going to happen, but they are sort of these warnings to you. You put them in the second circle so that you know these are things that are dangerous for me, that I have to know how I'm going to handle them. And I have to work with my sponsor and my therapist on having plans around these things so that I know how to handle them. So those are the kinds of things that go in the second circle. The third circle is your healthy sexuality and relationship plan. So these are the things that you are doing to move yourself toward healthy sexuality and healthy relationship. And those change throughout your entire recovery process. So your third circle is changing constantly. You're always working on something different in your third circle. So at the very beginning, when you're just getting sober, your third circle may be focused on basic self-care. Like you may be focused on getting sleep, eating good meals throughout the day, getting some exercise, making sure that you pay attention to your body and take care of it so that you don't get hungry, angry, lonely, tired, which is the HALT acronym that can make you more vulnerable to losing your sobriety. So a lot of times the third circle at the beginning is basic self-care focused. And then from there, once you get sobriety established and keep moving, things start to change in that circle. And then you start to work on all kinds of things like healthy communication with my significant other, learning how to feel my feelings and identify them and what to do with them when I have all these feelings, learning how to show non-sexual physical affection. So physical touch that isn't sexual in nature, knowing how to communicate my desire and attractiveness to my significant other without it feeling objectifying, learning how to talk about deep emotional things with my partner, learning how to resolve conflict with my partner. So all of those kinds of things end up in the third circle as you go through the recovery process and are kind of constantly learning and mastering the new skills that you need to have both healthy sexuality and a healthy relationship. So that is the definition of sobriety, how you define sobriety using the 3-circle method. And so I hope this is helpful to you all in terms of why it's important for you to know what your significant other's sobriety definition is. I'm amazed at how many betrayed partners don't know it. And I think it's vital information. You're in this relationship. So you have to know what the relationship actually consists of. So one last thing, and then we're going to wrap it up. So when you go and request this, when you ask your partner for this, when you ask the therapist for this, it's more likely going to be your partner, not the therapist who says this to you. But if you run into, this is my program, you are not supposed to be involved in my program, you need to stay on your own side of the street, this is not your business, this is my program of recovery, and you don't belong in it. You can get that defensive response where they're sort of using program speak to ask you, try to back you off and move you out of what you're requesting. So just stay very matter of fact, don't let it back you off, and stay very matter of fact and just say back to them, this is something that does involve me. Your sobriety definition impacts me directly. It has to do with the agreements in our relationship about what is okay and not okay sexually. It has to do with my safety. And for me to continue in this relationship with you and move close to you relationally or move close to you sexually, I need this information. This is information that I do need to have. So I do need us to have this conversation and for you to share this with me. So just stay in your place of knowing what you need and just come back with a very matter of fact, yes, I still do need this. And don't let them use that language to sort of back you off from your request, okay? All right, I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you all next time.